of man's greatest inventions has been the submarine. Using the entire ocean as a hiding place, she hits hard, and then she runs fast. Now, should she be spotted at the surface, then she has the capability of submerging very, very quickly, usually in less than about 60 seconds. And to the submariner, that's known as a crash dive.
Take her down before we're spotted. That baby might mount enough guns to blast us to kingdom come. Take her down. That's secured, sir.
Now, aboard the submarine, there's no time for error. The crew of 80 acts as one man. The complex operation of a 310-foot ship such as this is possible only through training, discipline, and constant attention to duty. Now, to tell us about the submarine, we have invited as our first guest one of the Navy's top-ranking officers. Years before he became a fleet admiral, he was also a top-notch submariner. And so it's with considerable pleasure that we welcome once again to Science in Action, Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz. How are you, sir?
Well, I'm delighted to be aboard, participate in this program. I heard you say that the submarine was one of man's greatest inventions. It might be that, and its most evil one, too. But submarines have earned a place in the navies of the world. Their effectiveness in World War I and World War II earned them a place in the navies of the world for the predictable future. They have many capabilities, and one of the people who is most competent to tell you about those capabilities is here in your studio tonight, Admiral Charles Lockwood.
Well, you know, Admiral, I was very interested in reading the foreword to his book, Sink 'em All, Submarine Warfare in the Pacific, and I'd just like to read that once again. Now, we had many submarine captains, but only one Lockwood.
That's correct. I still stick to that story.
Well, we're quite fortunate, as I say, in having him here with us on Science in Action, so I'd like to have you meet Vice Admiral Charles Lockwood. How are you, sir?
Thank you, Dr. Harold.
How do, Charles?
Very happy to see you again, sir.
Well, gentlemen, we're here for a specific purpose to learn something about submarines, so I suggest we let Admiral Lockwood take us on a tour, starting right now.
Fine.
Well, Doctor, this simplified diagram of the USS Nautilus, the world's first atomic-powered submarine, will serve to give us the general overall picture of our standard fleet-type submarines. They're divided into 8 compartments, each of which may be sealed off from the others. This forward compartment is the forward torpedo room. It contains the 6 bow tubes and also the reload torpedoes. The next compartment is called the forward battery room. Below the deck, it has enormous storage batteries which are used to propel the ship when submerged. Above it are the officers' quarters and the chief petty officers' quarters. These quarters are very small, but they're very comfortable and very handy.
Well, then, this next section would be the control room, and on a standard-type submarine, you'd have the conning tower up here. But since this is a Nautilus, then the conning tower would be right in this section.
That's correct. And in the standard submarine, these next 2 compartments would contain the mess room, the galley, and the crew's bunk room. I might add that in the galley, we prepare this Navy's best food prepared by the best cooks in the Navy.
Well, that's certainly something very close to me because I sure like food. Well, now, this matter of propulsion, being a landlubber, I'm very much interested in just how a submarine gets through the water, its propelling power. Now, how about that?
Well, the submarine has 2 systems of propulsion. On the surface, she uses her diesel engines, which can generate about 6,500 horsepower, and propel her at a speed of about 20 knots. For surface propulsion, she has enormous storage batteries all along the keel here, which produce power for driving her submerged.
Well, in other words, then, if you didn't have one of these snorkels and you wanted to go below the water, then you'd have to use the batteries for that sort of work.
That's correct.
Well, now, of course, all of us are familiar with car batteries, but this king-size battery that we have over here is something a little bit different. Perhaps you can tell us how many batteries of this type you have in a normal standard submarine.
Well, as you can see, this battery stands almost as high as a man. It weighs a little less than a ton, and it costs about $1,000 apiece. There are 120 of these in a submarine, and at full power, they're able to propel the submarine for about 10 miles. At minimum power, they're able to propel the submarine for about 100 miles.
About 100 miles. And then, of course, you have to come back to the surface and recharge the batteries.
That's correct. except that when you have a snorkel, you can charge while submerged.
This snorkel is quite interesting. Just how does that work now?
Well, this snorkel is simply an extensible breathing tube which brings air down to the engines and to the crew. The exhaust comes up this after pipe. Using those engines, you can recharge your batteries while submerged, and you can also propel yourself submerged while showing nothing more than this small snorkel float.
Oh, that's certainly very effective. Well, that gives us a good idea as to the propelling power, but on this matter of submerging the ballast, I wonder if you could demonstrate on this chart up here just what happens when a submarine does go under.
Well, in the first chart, we see the submarine on surface with no water in her main ballast tanks, which surround the hull. Yes. The main vents are then opened, and the water starts to flood into the ballast tank. She's now in an awash condition. In the third picture, she is completely submerged with her main ballast tanks full and her main vents closed.
Well, then when you want to come back to surface, you'd have to put compressed air and blow this water out of these compartments, right?
That's correct.
And then that would be tied in with these diving fins or planes on the
yes,
two ends of the surface.
The most important thing about diving or surfacing is the control of the boat. In diving, these bow planes are set down to give the ship an angle down. And then you bring her to an even keel with the stern planes and bring her to the proper depth and on an even trim fore and aft.
Yes, well, Admiral, I believe this would be the proper place to mention one of the most intricate training devices that I've ever seen. It's at the Mare Island Submarine Training Facility. And actually what it is an operating section, first of all, of a control room. And then above that, on the next floor, a conning tower. And then way up here, what would be the surface of the ocean, they have a floor on which small models of ships move about so that the periscope here can do the tracking of those boats up there. Let's see how that works by going, first of all, to this training facility right here at the control room and see what happens. Now, these large wheels, what would they be, Admiral?
These large wheels, which we see on the port side of the control room, serve to control the angle of the planes in diving. The instrument panel, which you see there, tells the underwater attitude of the ship at all times. The depth gauge, which is one of the most important instruments aboard, records the depths as we go down. Unless the submarine is dodging or attempting to escape depth charges, she doesn't go too deep. It is paramount, of course, to submerge far enough for the conning tower and superstructure to be below the surface. But it's also important not to descend to dangerous depths.
Well, Admiral, I have here a small barometer, and I know a barometer is very, very important in the operation of a submarine, but how does it fit into that pattern?
Well, the barometer is important because it shows you the pressure of the air in the control room at all time in the ship. It tells you instantly whether there is any opening which has failed to be closed on diving. You recall that the Squalus was lost in just such a diving accident.
Well, now, let's assume for the purpose of our demonstration that we have submerged. What would then be the next step?
We should then go to the post of the commanding officer in the conning tower at the periscope.
Well, I have a little periscope here. A youngster next door uses it to look over the back fence, and I look in here, and I can almost look right into the camera. You have a cutaway model there. Perhaps you could demonstrate how this periscope operates.
Well, this cutaway model will show sufficiently well the principles of the periscope. In a submarine, the periscope is a 40-foot steel tube. The commanding officer looks into this prism here, and the line of sight goes up and strikes this prism here, and so on out to the floor to the surface of the ocean. This prism may also be tilted so that he can search the sky for planes.
Well, suppose we go now back to the training facility at Mare Island and see how the periscope would actually work. And here we see Lieutenant Commander D.T. Morris going through a periscope drill, and the command, of course, is up periscope.
The skipper's first duty, as soon as the periscope comes above water, is to make a full 360-degree sweep of the horizon, to scan the earth off of the surface of the sea in all directions. He then focuses on his target. The next command we will hear is range mark, and following that, bearing mark. At these commands, the assistant approach officer, in this case Lieutenant Ware, takes note of the range to the target and her bearing on the azimuth circle.
And of course, to complete training, the skipper has to have something to focus on. So here we are topside on the third floor of this training facility looking at the boundless sea, or how it is simulated. And you'll notice that the deck is marked off in nautical miles. And across it move these little electric-powered dollies, or crabs as they are called. And on top of each crab is a model of an enemy ship, either a battleship or carrier or a destroyer. Now, these crabs can move at preset direction and speeds, which are scaled to the actual speed of ships at sea.
We'll now see Chief Lindgren setting up the surface problem on the control board. The zigzag course of each ship is set on the dials, and the crabs, controlled from this unit, carry out the plan. Let us watch it operate.
There's certainly a console that he has there.
It's a very complicated device.
Must have taken years to
It takes
develop
an
that
expert
unit.
to run it. Now we're on the top side, and here comes the periscope up to focus on the target. Let's go below now and watch this operation through the periscope.
You see the periscope coming around. Of course, the crew is down there working, as we saw a little bit earlier.
There we are.
And on the up periscope, of course, the skipper again makes a complete circle to scan the horizon. And then he focuses on the target. And very soon the target comes into view. In this case, it happens to be a heavy cruiser, which has been moving across the deck, mounted on the top of that crab. A most ingenious arrangement. And right here, of course, is one of these crabs, the type we were looking at. You see on the top here is the model on which the skipper was focused, and the mechanism is down in here, which moves this in any direction, whichever is desired according to what is set up in the console. Well, now we've talked a little bit about the eyes, the periscope, the eyes of the submarine. How about the listening devices, say the sonar of a submarine?
Well, the sonar system of the submarine is almost equally important with the periscope. It is represented on this model by this bubble on the keel. With this device, the operators can pick up underwater sound, much as a radio picks up sound waves in the air.
And then by the character of these sounds, you can tell what sort of an object is out there in the water, either ahead of you or any other place in the area.
That's right, Earl. A good sonar operator can tell the difference between the propeller sounds of a carrier and those of a destroyer.
And of course, we should mention that the sonar system also is able to send out supersonic waves, and those go out and hit an object and bounce back to the submarine.
And by the interval of time elapsed from the time they leave the ship until they come back, we can calculate the range.
Just how far away that object might be. Well, suppose we listen to some of the things we might hear from a submarine if, for example, we were listening to a commercial ship, such as a freighter, the sort of a beat that we would hear from the propellers, and then followed by the beat of a faster ship, such as a destroyer.